In the mid-18th century, the Indian subcontinent presented a complex and fragmented political landscape characterized by the declining authority of the Mughal Empire and the emergence of numerous regional powers that exercised varying degrees of autonomy. By this period, the Mughal emperors, who had once maintained centralized control over vast territories encompassing much of northern and central India, had largely lost their ability to enforce authority beyond the immediate surroundings of the imperial court at Delhi. The decline in imperial oversight had several causes, including succession disputes, administrative inefficiencies, regional revolts, and the economic exhaustion of the state from prolonged military campaigns. This weakening of central power allowed provincial governors, or nawabs, and other regional rulers to consolidate local control, often establishing independent administrations while formally recognizing Mughal suzerainty. Among these powers, the Nawabs of Bengal, the Maratha Confederacy in the Deccan, and the rulers of Mysore emerged as particularly influential actors on the subcontinent. Bengal, in particular, had become a prosperous and strategically significant region by the mid-1700s. Its fertile Ganges delta supported high agricultural productivity, generating substantial revenue through land taxes and trade in textiles, salt, and other commodities. The province was governed by the Nawab of Bengal, a position that had been increasingly independent from the Mughal emperor. Bengal's wealth attracted the attention of European trading companies, which had established factories or trading posts along the coast, and major river systems to facilitate commerce in textiles, spices, and other goods. The Dutch, French, and British East India companies all sought to capitalize on Bengal's economic potential. By this period, competition among these European powers had intensified both commercially and militarily. Bengal's internal politics were also volatile, marked by court intrigue, factionalism, and disputes over succession, which created opportunities for external actors to intervene in local affairs. The Maratha Confederacy, occupying a large portion of western and central India, had emerged from the decline of Mughal authority as a dominant regional power. The Marathas were organized as a confederation of semi-autonomous states, each governed by a chieftain or Peshwa, collectively coordinating military campaigns and political strategy. By the mid-18th century, the Marathas had expanded into northern India, establishing control over key provinces previously under nominal Mughal administration. They maintained a highly mobile cavalry force capable of projecting power across the subcontinent, and their political influence often intersected with the interests of other regional rulers, including the Nawabs of Awadh and Hyderabad. The Confederacy's decentralized structure allowed for flexibility in military and administrative matters, but it also contributed to internal competition and periodic conflicts among constituent chiefs. In southern India, the Kingdom of Mysore under rulers such as Krishnaraja Vodayar II and later Hyder Ali and his son Tipu Sultan represented a rising power with significant military capability and centralized administration. Mysore's strategic location in the Deccan and access to coastal ports facilitated trade and the procurement of military supplies, while its army incorporated both traditional forces and modernized units trained in contemporary warfare techniques. The Mysore rulers also maintained diplomatic and commercial relations with European trading companies, navigating a complex environment of alliances and rivalries with both regional and foreign powers. During this period, European influence in India was concentrated primarily through the activities of the East India Company, which had been established in 1600 by royal charter from the English crown. Initially chartered to engage in trade with the East Indies and later India, the company operated under a commercial mandate, maintaining factories, warehouses, and fortified trading posts in coastal cities such as Calcutta, Madras, and Bombay. Over time, the company's operations extended beyond commerce to include military and political interventions, often justified by the need to protect trading interests and company personnel. By the mid-18th century, the East India Company had developed a private military force sufficient to influence regional conflicts and assert control over key territories, a development that would later form the foundation for broader political dominance. The company's growing involvement in Indian politics was closely linked to the internal dynamics of the regions in which it operated. In Bengal, for instance, disputes over succession and administrative appointments created opportunities for the company to support particular factions in exchange for commercial privileges, territorial concessions, or recognition of authority. The Nawab of Bengal's dependence on company military and financial assistance gradually translated into political leverage for the company, enabling it to influence policy decisions, revenue collection, and governance. Similar patterns of intervention occurred in other regions, including southern India and the Deccan, where local rulers engaged with European powers to strengthen their positions relative to domestic rivals. The broader international context also shaped the company's activities in India. European conflicts, particularly between Britain and France, extended to the Indian subcontinent, where both powers sought to protect and expand their trading interests. The Carnatic Wars in southern India exemplified this dynamic, as British and French forces supported rival claimants to regional thrones while seeking to secure territorial and commercial advantages. These conflicts demonstrated the capacity of European powers to project military force in India and underscored the increasingly strategic importance of the subcontinent in global trade networks. The British East India Company, benefiting from financial resources and naval supremacy provided by the Crown, increasingly positioned itself as the dominant European actor in India by the mid-18th century. Economic conditions within India also facilitated the expansion of company influence. The subcontinent's agricultural productivity and artisanal industries generated substantial surpluses that could be taxed or traded, providing both local rulers and European powers with sources of revenue. The Ganges Delta in Bengal, the fertile plains of the north, and the Deccan Plateau supported dense populations and extensive markets, which were attractive to the company for commercial exploitation. Access to ports and navigable rivers allowed for the movement of goods both within India and to international markets, reinforcing the strategic value of particular regions. Control over trade routes, ports, and productive regions became increasingly intertwined with political authority, making economic dominance a key component of the eventual British takeover. By the mid-18th century, India's political fragmentation, the decline of centralized Mughal power, and the increasing sophistication of European commercial enterprises created a landscape in which foreign powers could exert significant influence over internal affairs. The East India Company's combination of military capability, commercial expertise, and strategic alliances with local elites allowed it to maneuver effectively within this environment. Company officials could exploit disputes among regional rulers, intervene in succession crises, and gradually consolidate authority over territories, often under the guise of protecting commerce or maintaining stability. These conditions set the stage for the decisive military and political interventions that would begin with the Battle of Plassey in 1757 and culminate in the establishment of company supremacy over much of India by the early 19th century. The mid-18th century also saw the emergence of administrative and logistical structures that enabled sustained European intervention. The East India Company maintained a trained cadre of military officers, administrators, and accountants capable of managing both commerce and governance. Its private armies were organized along European lines, equipped with artillery, muskets, and disciplined infantry, while its bureaucratic apparatus facilitated taxation, record-keeping, and communication across diverse regions. The company's ability to combine these capabilities with alliances and local knowledge allowed it to act decisively in moments of political instability, gradually extending its influence beyond purely commercial interests. In addition to military and administrative capacity, the company benefited from the relative disunity of regional powers. Nawabs, Maratha chiefs, and Mysore rulers often prioritized immediate political or economic gains over long-term coalition building, creating openings for external intervention. The overlapping jurisdictions, contested territories, and rivalries among regional states provided opportunities for the company to offer military support or political recognition in exchange for concessions. Over time, such interventions accumulated into substantial territorial and fiscal control, establishing patterns of dominance that would be formalized in subsequent decades. By the middle of the century, India was thus characterized by a dynamic interplay of weakening imperial authority, emergent regional powers, and increasingly assertive European enterprises. The East India Company occupied a unique position within this system, initially as a commercial entity, but progressively as a military and political actor. Bengal's wealth, the fragmentation of northern and central powers, the strategic capacity of southern kingdoms, and the competitive environment created by multiple European actors all contributed to a context in which the company could achieve incremental gains in authority. These gains were not uniform, and they depended on careful negotiation, military readiness, and exploitation of local conditions. But they cumulatively set the stage for the period of rapid territorial expansion that began with decisive military engagements in the late 1750s. By the mid-18th century, the British East India Company had established a significant presence in Bengal, one of the most prosperous regions of the Indian subcontinent. Bengal's economic prominence derived from its fertile Ganges Delta, which produced rice and other agricultural surpluses, and from a thriving artisanal and commercial sector, particularly in textiles such as muslin and silk. The region's wealth attracted not only European merchants, but also ambitious Indian rulers and officials, creating a highly competitive environment for trade, taxation, and political influence. The company's initial interest in Bengal had been primarily commercial, focused on acquiring revenue through trade in textiles, salt, opium, and other commodities destined for European and inter-Asian markets. However, over time, the company increasingly engaged with local politics, recognizing that control over governance could directly affect commercial profitability and strategic security. Company operations in Bengal were concentrated around its principal settlement at Calcutta, which had been fortified and developed into both a commercial hub and a base for military operations. From this center, Company officials managed factories along the Hooghly River and maintained networks with other European traders and local merchants. Calcutta's position allowed access to navigable waterways that connected the interior agricultural regions to coastal ports, facilitating both internal distribution and export. The company employed both British and locally recruited personnel in administrative, commercial, and military roles, creating a hybrid structure that combined European organizational methods with indigenous knowledge of the land, markets, and social hierarchies. Political engagement in Bengal arose initially through negotiations and alliances with the Nawab of Bengal, whose authority nominally extended over the province, but whose power had been weakened by internal factionalism, administrative inefficiencies, and military constraints. The East India Company leveraged these weaknesses to secure favorable trading privileges, establish fortified settlements, and intervene in succession disputes. Company officials frequently aligned with influential members of the Nawab's court, providing support in exchange for administrative concessions, land grants, and rights to revenue collection. Such arrangements allowed the company to exercise influence over local governance without assuming direct administrative responsibility at the outset, a strategy that minimized immediate risk while establishing long-term leverage. The company's growing political role coincided with broader regional instability. Bengal's provincial administration faced challenges from rival factions within the Nawab's court, as well as pressures from neighboring states and insurgent groups. The Nawab, Siraj ud-Daulah, who ascended to power in 1756, sought to assert control over company activities, including fortifications at Calcutta and the enforcement of duties and customs regulations. Tensions between the Nawab and company officials were compounded by European rivalries, particularly between the French and British, as both powers supported competing factions to advance their commercial and territorial interests. The company's military preparedness, combined with strategic alliances within Bengal, positioned it to act decisively in moments of political crisis. The company's intervention in Bengal's political environment was facilitated by its ability to mobilize both military and financial resources. The East India Company maintained a private army that included European officers and locally recruited sepoys, trained and equipped along European lines. This force, though relatively small compared to the standing armies of regional powers, was disciplined, strategically flexible, and integrated into a network of fortifications and supply lines. In addition to its military capacity, the company possessed substantial financial resources derived from trade profits and private investments, which enabled it to fund local operations, support allied factions, and negotiate with regional elites. These combined capabilities allowed the company to act as a stabilizing force when advantageous and as a coercive actor when necessary. By mid-century, the company's engagement in Bengal had expanded beyond trade and strategic alliances into quasi-administrative functions. Company officials began overseeing aspects of revenue collection, dispute resolution, and local governance, often in coordination with allied court officials. The management of revenue, in particular, became a critical instrument of control. Bengal's fiscal system was based on land taxation, which provided the Nawab and, increasingly, the company with the financial means to maintain armies, pay officials, and fund commercial ventures. The company's involvement in revenue administration allowed it to monitor economic activity, exert influence over local elites, and ensure that fiscal policies aligned with its commercial objectives. The integration of political, military, and economic strategies was exemplified by the company's approach to succession disputes within Bengal. When contestation arose over the position of Nawab, the company evaluated potential claimants based on their willingness to support British commercial and political interests. Through financial support, military presence, and diplomatic negotiation, company officials could sway outcomes, ensuring that allied rulers occupied key positions. This method of indirect control allowed the company to avoid the immediate administrative burden of direct governance, while securing influence over taxation, law, and commerce. European rivalries in Bengal further shaped the company's strategic position. The French East India Company maintained its own trading posts and aligned with factions opposed to British interests, providing military and logistical support where feasible. Competition extended beyond commerce into military preparedness, with both European powers maintaining fortifications, trained troops, and artillery. The British, leveraging alliances with local elites and superior naval and financial resources, gradually achieved a dominant position in the region. These conditions set the stage for decisive confrontation, as the interplay of local politics, commercial competition, and military readiness created both opportunity and risk for the company's expansion. Bengal's internal economy and social structure also played a role in the company's growing influence. The region's population was dense, with urban centers such as Murshidabad and Calcutta serving as nodes of trade, administration, and artisanal production. Textile manufacturing, particularly of muslin and silk, involved highly skilled labor and extensive networks of suppliers and merchants. Agricultural productivity in the Delta regions provided surpluses that could be taxed, traded, or stored for strategic purposes. The company's ability to monitor, regulate, and profit from these economic activities strengthened its leverage over both local elites and broader societal structures, creating the basis for a durable presence that extended beyond immediate trade. The interplay between company officers and local administrators required careful navigation of social, political, and cultural norms. British officials relied on interpreters, accountants, and intermediaries to communicate effectively with local populations and court officials. Understanding the hierarchies of landholding, kinship networks, and patronage systems allowed the company to exercise influence without provoking widespread resistance. The strategic combination of negotiation, alliance building, and selective coercion became a defining feature of the company's approach in Bengal, reflecting a nuanced understanding of both indigenous governance and European organizational methods. The company's engagement in Bengal during this period illustrates the transition from commercial enterprise to political actor. Its operations were multifaceted, involving trade, military preparedness, diplomacy, and administrative intervention. By cultivating alliances, intervening in succession disputes, and leveraging economic resources, the company gradually transformed its position from that of a trading entity to a stakeholder in regional governance. This incremental expansion of influence was facilitated by Bengal's wealth, political fragmentation, and the company's ability to integrate commercial, military, and diplomatic functions effectively. By the mid-1750s, the East India Company's presence in Bengal had become both substantial and strategically significant. The combination of economic acumen, military capacity, and political engagement positioned the company to intervene decisively in moments of instability, setting the stage for the pivotal military engagements that would determine the balance of power in the region. The foundations laid during this period, control over trade alliances with local elites, partial administration of revenue, and military readiness, enabled the company to act with both authority and flexibility, gradually consolidating power that would culminate in formal territorial dominance in the years following 1757. By the mid-1750s, the political and economic situation in Bengal had become increasingly tense, culminating in a confrontation between the East India Company and the Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Daulah. Siraj-ud-Daulah had ascended to the Nawabship in 1756, following the death of his grandfather-aligned predecessor, Alivardi Khan. His reign was marked by concerns over the growing influence of European trading companies within his territories, particularly the British East India Company. The company's expansion of fortified settlements, accumulation of wealth, and engagement in local politics were perceived as challenges to the Nawab's authority. Tensions were exacerbated by allegations of corruption, smuggling, and unauthorized fortifications, as the company fortified Calcutta without explicit permission from the Nawab. These factors contributed to an escalating series of disputes that would lead to military confrontation. The immediate precursor to the Battle of Plassey was the capture of Calcutta by Siraj-ud-Daulah in June 1756. The Nawab's forces entered the city, capturing company officials, European residents, and sepoys stationed there. Several hundred prisoners were confined in what became known as the Black Hole of Calcutta, an event that, though exaggerated in European accounts, became emblematic of the crisis facing the company. The occupation of Calcutta demonstrated the Nawab's willingness and capacity to challenge company interests militarily and prompted an urgent response from the company's leadership in Bengal and from its directors in London. In response, Robert Clive, who had previously served in Bengal and was familiar with both the company's military forces and local political structures, was appointed to lead the counter-operation to retake the city and restore company influence. The British military strategy in the campaign that led to the Battle of Plassey relied on a combination of force projection, political negotiation, and the exploitation of internal divisions within Bengal's elite. Clive recognized that a confrontation with the Nawab's army could be costly and uncertain. Therefore, he cultivated alliances with disaffected members of the Bengali court. Among the key figures was Mir Jafar, an influential commander within the Nawab's army, who had grievances regarding his position and prospects under Siraj-ud-Daulah's rule. Through promises of elevation to the position of Nawab and other material incentives, Clive secured Mir Jafar's cooperation. Additional support was cultivated among other court officials and regional administrators dissatisfied with the Nawab's governance, creating a network of internal allies who would ultimately determine the battle's outcome. The composition of forces at Plassey reflected the asymmetrical nature of the confrontation. The East India Company's army consisted of approximately 3,000 troops, including European officers and soldiers, as well as Indian sepoys trained and organized along European military lines. The forces were equipped with artillery, muskets, and disciplined infantry capable of executing coordinated maneuvers. The Nawab's army, by contrast, was estimated at around 50,000 men, a combination of cavalry, infantry, and artillery, supplemented by irregular troops and militia levied from local populations. Despite the numerical advantage, the Nawab's forces suffered from issues of cohesion, loyalty, and command. The presence of conspirators such as Mir Jafar within the command structure undermined coordination. and ensured that a significant portion of the Nawab's army remained inactive during critical phases of the engagement. The battlefield was situated near the village of Plassey, located along the Bhagirathi River, approximately 150 kilometers north of Calcutta. The terrain consisted of open fields interspersed with low embankments and watercourses, which influenced troop deployment and movement. The company forces occupied a position that allowed effective use of artillery and facilitated the protection of their flanks. Clive's tactical planning emphasized the retention of disciplined formations, judicious use of firepower, and the exploitation of enemy weaknesses. Intelligence gathered from local informants and internal allies provided critical insight into the disposition and morale of the Nawab's forces, enabling Clive to anticipate areas of potential defection and resistance. The engagement commenced on June 23, 1757, with initial skirmishes and exchanges of artillery fire. Company forces maintained a defensive posture while assessing the behavior of Allied elements within the Nawab's army. As the battle progressed, it became evident that key units under the command of conspirators were either non-participatory or deliberately withheld support from the Nawab's forces. Mir Jafar's inactivity, along with the inaction of other Allied commanders, created significant gaps in the defensive line and reduced the effectiveness of the Nawab's numerical superiority. The company's artillery and disciplined infantry were able to exert concentrated fire on the sections of the Nawab's army that engaged, causing disruption and lowering morale. Within several hours, the Nawab's forces began to withdraw, and the battle effectively concluded without the full deployment of Bengal's military strength. The political and administrative consequences of the battle were immediate. Following the withdrawal of Siraj-ud-Daulah, Robert Clive installed Mir Jafar as the new Nawab, fulfilling the agreement that had secured his cooperation. In return for his elevation, Mir Jafar agreed to provide the company with control over key revenue streams, trade privileges, and military assistance. The imposition of this puppet regime effectively shifted the balance of power in Bengal, granting the East India Company direct access to revenue and authority over regional administration without assuming immediate direct governance. The battle thus exemplified a combination of military strategy and political maneuvering, demonstrating the company's capacity to transform commercial influence into effective political control. In the aftermath of Plassey, the company undertook measures to consolidate authority and secure long-term dominance. The presence of a compliant Nawab facilitated the appointment of company officials to key administrative positions, ensuring oversight of revenue collection, legal adjudication, and local governance. The company also strengthened its military infrastructure, maintaining fortified positions and deploying trained sepoys to enforce authority and respond to internal or external threats. The integration of revenue management and military oversight created a hybrid system of control that enabled the company to extract economic resources efficiently while limiting the risk of confrontation with larger regional forces. The Battle of Plassey also highlighted the role of European rivalry and global context in shaping Indian affairs. French support for the Nawab, in terms of advisory personnel and limited military assistance, had been neutralized by the company's local alliances and superior coordination. The engagement demonstrated that European powers could influence the outcome of regional conflicts, but that success depended on effective manipulation of local political networks and disciplined military execution. The outcome reinforced the company's confidence in leveraging strategic alliances with disaffected local actors, an approach that would be replicated in subsequent campaigns across India. Economic implications of the battle were substantial. Control over Bengal's revenue system enabled the company to access a substantial financial base, estimated at several million rupees annually, which could be directed toward both commercial expansion and military investment. Bengal's agricultural productivity and artisanal production continued to support trade both internally and externally, and the company's oversight facilitated the extraction of surpluses while maintaining essential economic functionality. The revenue secured from Bengal provided the financial underpinning for further territorial expansion and administrative consolidation in subsequent decades, forming the foundation of the company's transformation from a trading enterprise into a governing authority. The social and political structure of Bengal remained complex in the immediate aftermath of Plassey. Although Mir Jafar occupied the Nawabship, real authority was increasingly exercised by company officials who monitored appointments, revenue collection, and military matters. Traditional elites, including zamindars, bureaucrats, and military officers, had to navigate the new power dynamics, balancing loyalty to the nominal Nawab with pragmatic cooperation with the company. These adjustments created a precedent for indirect control, whereby local structures were co-opted to serve the objectives of an external power without complete administrative overhaul. The Battle of Plassey thus represents a turning point in the history of British involvement in India. The engagement demonstrated the effectiveness of combining limited military force with strategic alliances and political manipulation, allowing a relatively small European company to assert control over a large and wealthy region. It also marked the beginning of a systematic approach by the East India Company to expand influence through fiscal, administrative, and military means, a process that would continue over subsequent decades. Plassey established Bengal as the primary base of British operations in India and set the pattern for future interventions, blending diplomacy, local collaboration, and disciplined military action to achieve political objectives. By mid-1757, the East India Company had transitioned from a commercial trading entity operating within a foreign territory to a dominant political force capable of determining succession, controlling revenue, and influencing governance. The methods and outcomes of the Battle of Plassey would serve as a model for later engagements in other regions, illustrating the potential for a European enterprise to achieve territorial and fiscal control through a combination of military strategy, political alliance, and economic management. Following the Battle of Plassey in June 1757, the British East India Company moved swiftly to consolidate its authority in Bengal, transforming the region from a wealthy provincial territory into a strategic base for political, military, and economic control. The installation of Mir Jafar as Nawab, though initially intended to secure company influence through a compliant intermediary, did not immediately produce stable governance. The administration faced internal resistance from factions loyal to the previous Nawab, Siraj ud Daulah, as well as skepticism among regional elites regarding the authority of a ruler seen as imposed by foreign powers. The company's objectives were to stabilize the region, secure the revenue necessary to finance further operations, and establish institutional mechanisms that would extend British influence over the local administration while maintaining the appearance of native rule. One of the initial challenges in consolidating control was the reorganization of revenue collection. Bengal's agricultural system was highly productive, with fertile plains along the Ganges supporting the cultivation of rice, wheat, indigo, and other cash crops. The region's revenue had traditionally been administered through a network of zamindars, who collected taxes on behalf of the Nawab and the Mughal state. Following Plassey, the East India Company recognized the necessity of integrating these traditional structures into a system that could provide both fiscal reliability and oversight. Company officials, including key figures such as Robert Clive and later Warren Hastings, implemented measures to ensure that revenues were directed toward both the maintenance of company military forces and the expansion of administrative capacity. This included auditing existing tax obligations, enforcing compliance among local landholders, and reorganizing subordinate officials to align with company objectives. The relationship with Mir Jafar required careful management. While he held the formal title of Nawab, his authority was circumscribed by company influence. Military and fiscal control effectively resided with the company, and Mir Jafar relied on company support to maintain his position against potential challengers. To reinforce the dependency of the Nawab on company authority, officials cultivated additional alliances with local elites, including court officials, military commanders, and influential merchants. These alliances created a network of intermediaries through which the company could exercise influence over regional policy decisions, manage disputes, and ensure the collection of revenues. The combination of political patronage and administrative oversight allowed the company to consolidate power without the need for immediate direct governance. Military organization during this period was a crucial component of consolidation. Although the Battle of Plassey had demonstrated the effectiveness of political alliances in securing victory, the potential for rebellion or external challenge remained significant. The East India Company maintained a trained military force composed of European officers and Indian sepoys, strategically deployed to defend key settlements, fortifications, and trade routes. Fortifications in Calcutta and along the Hooghly River were reinforced, and the army was positioned to respond rapidly to disturbances. These measures ensured that the company retained the capacity to enforce authority, suppress local resistance, and deter rival European powers from exploiting instability. During this period, the East India Company also engaged in active diplomacy to mitigate potential challenges from neighboring states. The Nawabs of Awadh and Arcot, as well as other regional powers, were influential in the political landscape of northern and eastern India. Company officials negotiated treaties and agreements that secured neutrality or cooperation from these states, thereby reducing the risk of coordinated opposition. At the same time, the company monitored French activities in the region as the French East India Company continued to support factions opposed to British influence. By combining local alliances, strategic military deployment, and careful diplomacy, the company effectively neutralized potential threats and reinforced its dominance in Bengal. Economic exploitation was a central feature of consolidation. Bengal's wealth had been a motivating factor for British intervention, and control over fiscal resources became the foundation for both regional dominance and further expansion. The company implemented systems to ensure accurate assessment and collection of land revenue, while also regulating trade to maximize profits from exports. Bengal's textile production, particularly in muslin and silk, was of global significance, and the company maintained oversight of both production and export to European and intra-Asian markets. Revenue derived from these activities enabled the company to finance administrative expansion, military operations, and diplomatic initiatives, creating a self-sustaining structure of authority. The consolidation period also saw the emergence of administrative reforms that institutionalized company control. Officials introduced structured bureaucratic mechanisms for record-keeping, financial management, and correspondence. Auditing and reporting systems were implemented to track revenue flows, monitor the performance of intermediaries, and detect corruption or inefficiency. This professionalization of administration allowed the company to exercise consistent authority over a vast and complex region while minimizing the need for constant direct intervention. The integration of local knowledge with European administrative practices facilitated the effective governance of Bengal and provided a template for future territorial acquisitions. Social and cultural considerations influenced consolidation strategies. The company recognized the importance of working within existing hierarchical and social frameworks. Local elites, including landholders, officials, and military commanders, retained nominal authority and privileges, but their actions were increasingly aligned with company interests through incentives, appointments, and supervision. Religious and community structures were observed and, where possible, incorporated into governance strategies to reduce resistance. This approach allowed the company to achieve practical control while maintaining the appearance of continuity with traditional forms of authority. Conflict during the consolidation period extended beyond internal management to external military engagements. In 1758, Clive led campaigns against remnants of forces loyal to Siraj ud-Daulah and allied regional actors, including forces supported by the French. These campaigns demonstrated the company's ability to project military power beyond urban centers and fortifications, ensuring that opposition in rural areas and along strategic river routes could be suppressed effectively. The combination of disciplined infantry, artillery, and local intelligence allowed company forces to operate efficiently in diverse terrain and respond rapidly to threats. The period from 1757 to 1764 also involved the strategic management of succession, alliances, and regional governance. Following Plassey, Mir Jafar's position was contested by rivals within the Nawab's court and by factions loyal to previous rulers. The company intervened to stabilize his administration, providing both military support and political guidance. In some cases, these interventions included direct negotiation with local chieftains, resolution of disputes among zamindars, and the reassignment of officials to ensure compliance with company policy. This comprehensive approach to governance combined coercion, diplomacy, and administration to create a stable environment conducive to both economic extraction and political dominance. The culmination of consolidation was reflected in the events leading to the Battle of Buxar in 1764. During this period, the company had strengthened its military position, secured key revenue streams, and cultivated a network of compliant allies in Bengal and neighboring regions. The administrative structures established between 1757 and 1764 provided a foundation for effective mobilization of resources and troops, enabling the company to confront larger regional coalitions when necessary. These developments marked the transformation of Bengal from a wealthy provincial territory into a strategic base for the expansion of British influence across northern and eastern India. Revenue and trade policies enacted during consolidation also had broader implications for the Indian economy. The emphasis on maximizing fiscal extraction and regulating trade flows altered patterns of production and distribution. Agricultural surpluses were directed toward revenue payments and export, while artisanal industries were incorporated into global trade networks under company supervision. These changes reinforced the company's financial stability and facilitated reinvestment in military and administrative infrastructure. The integration of economic, military, and political control during this period exemplified the strategic sophistication of the company's approach to territorial dominance. By 1764, the East India Company had established both the administrative and military mechanisms necessary to exercise sustained control over Bengal. The foundations laid during the period of consolidation allowed the company to extend its influence beyond the province, prepare for engagement with rival powers, and secure revenue and logistical support for further campaigns. Bengal's political and economic transformation under company oversight illustrates the methods by which a commercial enterprise evolved into a territorial power, combining alliances, coercion, bureaucratic organization, and military preparedness to achieve durable control over a complex and prosperous region. By 1764, the East India Company had consolidated its authority over Bengal following the Battle of Plassey and the subsequent installation of Mir Jafar as Nawab. However, the company's control remained contested by both internal factions and neighboring regional powers. The broader political landscape of northern India was shaped by the continuing decline of the Mughal Empire, which, despite its nominal authority, lacked the military and administrative capacity to enforce central control. This power vacuum enabled regional actors such as Shuja-ud-Dawla, the Nawab of Awadh, and Mir Qasim, the successor of Mir Jafar in Bengal, to assert independent authority while contesting company influence. Tensions over fiscal authority, territorial control, and military dominance eventually escalated into open confrontation, culminating in the Battle of Buxar on October 22, 1764, a decisive engagement that established the company as the dominant political and military power in eastern and northern India. Mir Qasim, installed as Nawab of Bengal in 1760 by the company to replace Mir Jafar, initially sought to assert independence while maintaining formal allegiance to the East India Company. Qasim's administration implemented several reforms aimed at strengthening the fiscal and military capacity of Bengal. He relocated the capital from Murshidabad to Munger to distance the administration from company influence, reorganized the revenue system to reduce dependence on company agents, and attempted to professionalize the army by recruiting both European-trained sepoys and traditional forces. These reforms were intended to consolidate the Nawab's authority and assert Bengal's sovereignty, particularly in light of persistent interference by the company in taxation, trade, and territorial administration. Conflict arose when Mir Qasim's policies clashed with company interests, particularly regarding trade regulations and customs duties. Qasim sought to establish parity between European traders, imposing uniform taxes to ensure that the company no longer enjoyed preferential treatment over French, Dutch, or local merchants. The company resisted these measures, viewing them as a threat to profitability and authority. Escalating disputes over taxation, military jurisdiction, and the treatment of company personnel ultimately led to the mobilization of forces on both sides. By 1763, minor skirmishes and border conflicts had already tested the limits of control in Bihar and along the borders of Bengal, demonstrating that both parties were preparing for a larger confrontation. Shuji-ud-Dawla of Awadh, allied with Mir Qasim and the deposed Mir Jafar, entered the conflict to assert his influence and protect his strategic interests in northern India. Awadh's support was motivated by the desire to counterbalance the expanding power of the company and to secure territorial and fiscal advantages. Additionally, Shah Alam II, the Mughal emperor, nominally aligned with Mir Qasim and Shuji-ud-Dawla sought to reassert symbolic authority over Bengal and neighboring territories. Though the emperor's direct involvement in military operations was limited by the weakness of the imperial administration, the coalition of Mir Qasim, Shuji-ud-Dawla, and Shah Alam II represented a formidable force on paper, combining the resources and manpower of Bengal, Awadh, and the nominal Mughal apparatus. The East India Company's forces were commanded by Major Hector Munro and included both European officers and sepoys recruited from various regions. Estimates indicate that company forces numbered approximately 10,000 troops, organized into disciplined infantry, cavalry, and artillery units capable of executing coordinated battlefield maneuvers. The company's military strength was enhanced by superior training, disciplined command structures, and effective logistics, allowing sustained operations over extended distances. European officers provided leadership and tactical guidance, while sepoys contributed knowledge of local terrain, communication networks, and auxiliary support. The company's ability to integrate these components into a cohesive fighting force contrasted with the coalition forces' more fragmented command and variable loyalty among contingents. The coalition opposing the company is estimated to have fielded approximately 40,000 troops, comprising infantry, cavalry, and artillery drawn from the forces of Mir Qasim, Shuji-ud-Dawla, and nominally from the Mughal emperor. Despite numerical superiority, the coalition faced significant challenges in coordination and discipline. Command structures were decentralized, and competing interests among allies hindered effective cooperation. Mir Qasim's army was trained and equipped to a degree, but loyalty was uneven, particularly among troops recruited from recently annexed territories or those previously aligned with Mir Jafar. Shuji-ud-Dawla's forces, while substantial, were motivated by regional ambitions that did not always align fully with the objectives of Qasim or the Mughal emperor. These factors reduced the coalition's operational effectiveness despite its larger size. The battlefield for the engagement was situated near Buxar, located on the banks of the Ganges River in present-day Bihar. The terrain consisted of flat agricultural plains interspersed with low embankments and riverine channels, which influenced troop deployment and artillery placement. Company forces occupied advantageous positions, with artillery carefully sighted to maximize firepower and infantry formations arranged to absorb and repel attacks. Intelligence on coalition movements and terrain features, supplemented by local informants, allowed the company to anticipate maneuvers and respond effectively to threats. In contrast, the coalition forces faced challenges in coordinating attacks across disparate units and navigating terrain under conditions of partial communication. The battle commenced with initial artillery exchanges, followed by the deployment of infantry and cavalry units on both sides. Company forces maintained discipline and cohesion, executing prearranged formations that allowed concentrated fire on advancing coalition elements. The coalition, hampered by disjointed command and coordination issues, struggled to maintain a unified front. Critical sections of Mir Qasim's forces were positioned defensively but failed to engage effectively, reflecting both limited morale and internal uncertainty. Shuji Udala's cavalry attempted flanking maneuvers but encountered concentrated artillery and musket fire, resulting in significant disruption and attrition. Over the course of several hours, the numerical advantage of the coalition was offset by the tactical discipline and firepower of the Company's forces. A decisive factor in the outcome was the defection or inaction of key elements within the coalition. Units loyal to Mir Jafar and other previously allied officials withheld engagement or retreated under pressure, undermining the cohesion of the opposing army. This pattern of internal division, previously observed at Plassey, again demonstrated the effectiveness of the Company's strategy of cultivating disaffected allies and exploiting factionalism. By mid-afternoon, the coalition's positions had deteriorated, and retreat became inevitable. Casualty estimates indicate that the coalition suffered substantial losses, both in personnel and material, while Company casualties remained comparatively low due to disciplined defensive operations and concentrated firepower. The aftermath of the Battle of Buxar fundamentally altered the political landscape of northern and eastern India. The victory established the East India Company as the preeminent military and political power in the region, with formal recognition of authority over Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. Mir Qasim was deposed, and Mir Jafar was reinstated as a nominal ruler under Company supervision. The Company also imposed arrangements that required the payment of revenues, the provision of military support, and the cession of certain fiscal and administrative rights, solidifying its control over governance and economic resources. Shuji Udala negotiated terms that secured a degree of autonomy for Awadh, but recognized Company supremacy in matters of regional military and fiscal authority. The nominal Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II acknowledged the Company's power in practical terms, formalizing the transition from symbolic to effective authority. The consolidation following Buxar involved the integration of administrative and military structures to ensure sustained control. Company officials assumed responsibility for revenue collection, judicial oversight, and coordination with regional military forces. The experience of Buxar informed future approaches to governance, demonstrating the importance of disciplined military organization, strategic alliances with local elites, and careful management of revenue and administrative mechanisms. The Company's ability to combine these elements created a model for territorial expansion that would be replicated in subsequent campaigns against Mysore, the Marathas, and other regional powers. Economically, the Company's control over Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa provided access to substantial revenues that could be allocated to administrative expansion and military operations. Bengal's agricultural productivity and artisanal industries continued to generate surpluses for trade and taxation. The Company implemented oversight measures to ensure efficient extraction of revenue, while maintaining sufficient stability to avoid widespread disruption of production. These arrangements created a financial foundation for continued territorial expansion and the establishment of governance mechanisms extending beyond Bengal. Following the Company's decisive victory at Buxar in 1764, the East India Company assumed de facto sovereignty over Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa, effectively transitioning from a commercial enterprise into a political authority with territorial jurisdiction. This transformation necessitated the establishment of structured administrative and revenue systems capable of sustaining governance, extracting resources, and maintaining military readiness. The administrative framework developed during this period laid the foundations for British colonial governance in India, emphasizing a combination of European bureaucratic methods, local intermediaries, and fiscal oversight. The primary objective of the company's administration was the systematic collection of revenue. Land taxation was identified as the principal source of income, with Bengal's agricultural productivity forming the backbone of fiscal extraction. The fertile plains of the Ganges Delta produced substantial surpluses of rice, wheat, and other commodities, while cultivated lands in Bihar and Orissa contributed additional resources. Company officials, including Robert Clive and later Warren Hastings, implemented reforms to streamline revenue collection, reduce corruption, and ensure accountability among local agents. The assessment and collection processes were designed to maximize the company's income without provoking widespread unrest, creating a balance between fiscal efficiency and political stability. One of the central administrative innovations was the appointment of company officials to oversee revenue collection at multiple levels. At the provincial level, British residents were stationed to supervise the Nawab's court and provide guidance on fiscal matters. These residents monitored the allocation of revenue, advised on administrative appointments, and coordinated military support when required. At the district level, the company relied on a combination of local zamindars, village headmen, and appointed intermediaries to implement assessments, collect taxes, and maintain records. This hybrid structure integrated indigenous knowledge of landholdings and social hierarchies with European methods of accounting and oversight, enabling the company to exercise effective control over extensive territories. The permanent settlement, later formalized in 1793 but conceptually initiated during this period, represented an attempt to stabilize revenue extraction by defining the responsibilities of landholders and ensuring predictable income. Company officials sought to establish fixed assessments that would provide clarity for both zamindars and the administration. By defining obligations in monetary terms, the company aimed to secure revenues without the administrative burden of direct supervision over every village. While full codification occurred later, early measures to fix assessments, standardize collection practices, and audit records reflected an emerging bureaucratic approach to governance, emphasizing transparency, predictability, and administrative accountability. Judicial administration was another critical component of the company's consolidation. The East India Company inherited complex legal frameworks rooted in Mughal and regional law, encompassing both civil and criminal matters. To facilitate governance, company officials established courts and legal officers who adjudicated disputes, supervised revenue enforcement, and maintained records. European officers provided oversight, while local legal intermediaries interpreted customary law and assisted in its application. This system allowed the company to assert authority over disputes affecting fiscal, commercial, and territorial matters while maintaining the appearance of continuity with pre-existing legal traditions. Military organization and integration with administrative structures were essential for enforcing company authority. The East India Company maintained European-trained regiments and Indian sepoys under disciplined command, deployed strategically to protect revenue collectors, fortifications, and trade routes. The army also served as a deterrent to rebellion and an instrument of coercion when local resistance arose. The coordination between revenue officers and military commanders ensured that fiscal policies could be implemented effectively, with the capacity to respond rapidly to disturbances or challenges from rival regional powers. The combination of disciplined military force and structured administration created a sustainable mechanism for political control. Trade oversight formed an additional layer of administrative responsibility. Bengal's economy was heavily integrated into global markets through the export of textiles, salt, and other commodities. The East India Company maintained oversight of production and trade flows to ensure that revenues and commercial profits aligned with company objectives. Regulations were enforced to prevent the diversion of trade benefits to unauthorized actors and to secure the company's monopolies in key commodities. The integration of trade administration with revenue collection and political authority strengthened the company's position as both a governing power and a commercial entity, creating a system capable of sustaining territorial expansion. The administration also addressed challenges related to corruption, inefficiency, and local resistance. Company officials implemented auditing procedures, maintained detailed records of assessments and collections, and rotated personnel to minimize entrenched local influence. Officers were instructed to monitor the performance of intermediaries and to intervene when discrepancies arose. Enforcement mechanisms included both legal adjudication and, where necessary, the application of military force to ensure compliance. By instituting these controls, the company created a governance structure that combined oversight, accountability, and flexibility, enabling it to manage complex social and economic landscapes effectively. Local intermediaries played a critical role in bridging the gap between European officials and the broader population. Zamindars and village headmen were integrated into the administrative network, responsible for implementing revenue policies, maintaining order, and providing information on social, economic, and political conditions. These intermediaries facilitated communication, reduced friction, and ensured that company directives could be executed efficiently. At the same time, the reliance on local actors allowed the company to minimize direct administrative intrusion, reducing the cost and logistical challenges of governing large territories. Cultural and social considerations influenced the structure of administration. Company officials recognized the importance of local customs, religious practices, and hierarchical structures in maintaining order and cooperation. Revenue assessments were adapted to reflect local conditions. Legal proceedings incorporated customary norms, and alliances with influential families were used to secure loyalty. This pragmatic approach allowed the company to consolidate power without provoking widespread unrest, demonstrating an understanding of the interplay between governance, social hierarchy, and economic productivity. During this period, the company also developed mechanisms for information gathering and intelligence. Detailed records of land holdings, population, agricultural productivity, and revenue flows were maintained to inform administrative decisions. Reports from military officers, residents, and intermediaries provided insight into local sentiment, potential threats, and economic performance. The integration of data collection with administrative oversight allowed the company to anticipate challenges, adjust policies, and allocate resources effectively, creating a model of governance that emphasized rational management and empirical assessment. The consolidation of administration and revenue systems in Bengal set a precedent for subsequent expansion across India. The methods refined during this period, hybrid bureaucracies combining European oversight with local intermediaries, systematic revenue assessment, military enforcement, and careful integration of social norms became the template for company governance in new territories. By establishing reliable mechanisms for resource extraction, law enforcement, and political control, the company created conditions that allowed it to project power efficiently and sustain long-term dominance. By the early 1760s, the East India Company's administrative and fiscal systems in Bengal had achieved functional coherence. Revenue collection was organized, military enforcement was established, and local intermediaries were integrated into governance networks. The combination of economic extraction, legal oversight, and military readiness provided the company with a durable structure of authority. The experience gained in administering Bengal informed strategies for engagement with other Indian powers, including Mysore, Awadh, and the Marathas, as the company expanded its territorial influence over subsequent decades. The latter half of the 18th century in southern India was characterized by sustained military and political conflict involving the East India Company and the Sultanate of Mysore. Mysore, under the leadership of Hyder Ali and subsequently his son Tipu Sultan, had emerged as a centralized and militarily capable state, challenging the expansion of company influence in the Deccan and along the western coastal regions. The origins of these conflicts lay in the strategic and economic significance of southern India, where fertile agricultural land trade routes linking the interior with ports on the Arabian Sea and political influence over neighboring territories made Mysore both a regional power and a competitor for European interests. The company sought to secure commercial privileges, strategic control, and military dominance, while Mysore pursued territorial consolidation and autonomy in response to external pressures. Hyder Ali assumed de facto leadership of Mysore in the 1760s, rising through the ranks of the military and administrative system established under the Vodayar dynasty. His authority was solidified by reforms in the army, centralization of revenue collection, and the establishment of an effective administrative apparatus. Hyder Ali maintained a standing army trained along European lines, incorporating disciplined infantry, cavalry, artillery, and rocket units, which allowed Mysore to resist both internal rivals and external threats. The state's revenues were derived from agricultural taxation, trade tariffs, and the mobilization of tribute from subordinate regions, providing the resources necessary to sustain military operations and administrative expansion. The first major conflict between the East India Company and Mysore, the First Anglo-Mysore War, 1767 to 1769, was precipitated by disputes over territorial boundaries and political alliances in the Carnatic region, encompassing present-day Tamil Nadu and parts of Karnataka. The Carnatic had previously been a site of contestation between the company, the Nawab of Arcot, and Mysore, with shifting alliances and competing claims complicating governance. Hyder Ali leveraged local dissatisfaction with the Nawab of Arcot and combined forces with other regional actors to challenge company influence. The company, seeking to protect trade interests, reinforce territorial claims, and secure revenue collection, deployed both European and sepoy forces to confront Mysore militarily. The campaign involved sieges, maneuver warfare, and engagements across diverse terrain, including rivers, fortified towns, and interior plains. The war concluded with the Treaty of Madras in 1769, which established temporary boundaries and recognized the strategic autonomy of Mysore, though underlying tensions persisted. Following Hyder Ali's death in 1782, his son Tipu Sultan assumed leadership and intensified efforts to consolidate Mysore's authority while actively resisting British expansion. Tipu Sultan implemented administrative and military reforms, including improvements in artillery production, the training of European-style infantry, and the use of rocket corps in field engagements. He also pursued diplomatic initiatives to secure alliances with the French, recognizing their presence in India as a counterweight to British influence. Tipu's foreign policy and military strategies were designed to protect Mysore's sovereignty and to extend control over neighboring territories in the Carnatic, Malabar, and Coimbatore regions, positioning Mysore as the principal power in southern India outside British-controlled areas. The Second Anglo-Mysore War, 1780 to 1784, arose from competing territorial claims, trade disputes, and the alignment of Mysore with French interests against the company. Initial engagements demonstrated the capability of Mysore's forces to conduct effective field operations, including sieges and mobile campaigns. Tipu Sultan and Hyder Ali's generals executed coordinated attacks on British outposts, disrupting supply lines and challenging the company's control of the Coromandel coast. European officers, commanding company regiments and sepoy units, responded with disciplined formations, artillery barges, and fortified positions to counter Mysore advances. The war concluded with the Treaty of Mangalore in 1784, which restored pre-war boundaries and facilitated a temporary cessation of hostilities, although both sides prepared for renewed confrontation. The Third Anglo-Mysore War, 1790 to 1792, was triggered by Tipu Sultan's aggressive expansion into territories adjacent to company-controlled regions and the intervention of allied states, including the Marathas and the Nizam of Hyderabad, in support of the British. The conflict was marked by protracted sieges of fortified towns, maneuvering across rivers and difficult terrain, and repeated engagements involving both conventional and irregular forces. The company's forces, coordinated with Maratha and Hyderabad contingents, implemented strategies aimed at isolating Mysore's territories and cutting off access to key resources and coastal ports. Tipu Sultan demonstrated effective resistance, employing both conventional tactics and innovative uses of rocketry and field fortifications to slow company advances. The war concluded with the Treaty of Seringapatam in 1792, under which Tipu ceded approximately half of Mysore's territory to the company, and its allies paid an indemnity and provided hostages to ensure compliance with the treaty's terms. And the perception among the British and their allies that Mysore posed an enduring threat to regional stability. The company's strategy involved a coordinated campaign with allied forces from the Marathas and Hyderabad, applying sustained military pressure to capture key fortifications and compel capitulation. The siege of Srirangapatna, Mysore's capital, was central to the campaign, involving extensive artillery bombardment, infantry assaults, and the encirclement of defensive positions. The operation was meticulously planned and executed, emphasizing coordination among European officers, sepoy contingents, and allied regional forces. The fall of Srirangapatna on May 4, 1799 resulted in the death of Tipu Sultan and the effective dissolution of independent Mysore's territorial sovereignty. Following the siege, the company installed a member of the Vodiyar dynasty as a nominal ruler with real authority vested in a British-controlled regency thereby integrating Mysore into the company's sphere of influence while maintaining a facade of local autonomy. The consequences of the Mysore Wars were multifaceted. Militarily, the conflicts demonstrated the effectiveness of disciplined European-trained forces, the strategic deployment of artillery and rockets, and the integration of allied contingents in achieving territorial objectives. Administratively, the company gained experience in governing newly acquired regions, managing local elites, and consolidating revenue and trade systems in territories formerly under Mysore control. Politically, the wars facilitated the expansion of British influence across southern India, establishing the company as a principal power in the Deccan and coastal regions and providing a template for subsequent engagements with other regional powers, including the Marathas. Economic and fiscal impacts were significant. The acquisition of Mysorean territories enabled the company to control agriculturally productive regions, key trade routes, and ports, facilitating maritime commerce. Revenue collection was integrated into existing company systems, with local intermediaries employed to administer taxation, monitor agricultural production, and oversee trade flows. Mysore's previous administrative and military structures were partially retained and adapted, providing continuity while ensuring compliance with British objectives. These arrangements strengthened the company's financial base, supporting further military campaigns and administrative expansion throughout India. The Mysore Wars also illustrated the interplay between European colonial powers and Indian states. Tipu Sultan's alliance with the French highlighted the ongoing competition for influence in India and the strategic importance of external support in regional conflicts. The company's capacity to counter French involvement, coordinate with Indian allies, and apply sustained military pressure demonstrated the evolution of its operational and diplomatic capabilities. These experiences informed subsequent campaigns against other significant powers, including the Marathas, shaping the company's approach to expansion and consolidation. By 1799, the East India Company had achieved durable control over southern India, establishing direct or indirect authority over Mysore while maintaining regional alliances and supervision of trade and revenue. The experience of the Mysore Wars emphasized the necessity of combining military capability, strategic alliances, administrative oversight, and fiscal management to achieve sustained territorial control. The region's integration into the company's sphere of influence provided both resources and strategic depth, facilitating operations in the Deccan, Carnatic, and neighboring territories. By the late 18th century, the East India Company's expansion across northern, eastern, and southern India necessitated a systematic approach to relations with the numerous indigenous princely states that retained significant regional authority. The company faced a landscape in which local rulers controlled extensive territories, commanded military forces, and exercised traditional sovereignty over internal affairs. Direct annexation of every state was neither feasible nor economically efficient. Consequently, the company developed a policy of diplomacy, coercion, and subsidiary alliances that allowed it to exert influence and secure strategic objectives while avoiding the costs associated with direct administration. These arrangements, formalized through treaties and agreements, became a central instrument in the consolidation of British authority across the subcontinent. The principal mechanism for establishing control over princely states was the subsidiary alliance system, introduced and refined under the leadership of Warren Hastings and later Charles Cornwallis. Under these arrangements, a princely state retained nominal internal sovereignty, including authority over local administration, law, and revenue collection. In exchange, the state ceded control over its external affairs and military defense to the company. This meant that the state could not enter into treaties, wage war, or conduct diplomacy independently. The company, in return, committed to maintaining a contingent of troops within the state's territory, funded either by the state itself or, in some cases, partially by company revenues. These arrangements ensured that local rulers were dependent on the company for both security and legitimacy, effectively subordinating them without immediate territorial annexation. The strategic rationale behind subsidiary alliances was multifaceted. First, they created a buffer of compliant states surrounding company-controlled territories, reducing the risk of coordinated resistance from powerful neighboring rulers. Second, they minimized the need for large-scale British garrisons in every territory, thereby conserving resources and maintaining military flexibility. Third, they allowed the company to project influence into regions with complex political and cultural dynamics, relying on local knowledge and existing administrative structures to facilitate governance. This policy demonstrated a pragmatic approach to expansion, leveraging diplomacy, coercion, and economic incentives to achieve political objectives. Revenue arrangements under these alliances were carefully structured. Many states agreed to contribute financial support for the maintenance of British troops stationed within their territories. These contributions were frequently significant, providing the company with additional fiscal resources while simultaneously imposing a degree of dependency on the local ruler. By controlling military and diplomatic functions, the company could also influence succession disputes, administrative appointments, and territorial boundaries within the Allied states. The combination of financial obligation and political oversight ensured that the princely states remained subordinate to company interests while avoiding confrontation. Relations with the Maratha Confederacy illustrate the operational principles of the subsidiary alliance system before the complete annexation of territories. Although the Marathas retained extensive internal autonomy and controlled substantial military resources, the company engaged in treaties that limited their external military activities and required acknowledgement of British supremacy in matters of regional diplomacy. Similarly, in the Deccan and southern India, states such as Hyderabad entered agreements recognizing the authority of the company over foreign relations and defense while retaining formal sovereignty over internal affairs. In each case, the company carefully calibrated the balance between coercion and accommodation to secure compliance and maintain stability. The subsidiary alliance system also had significant military implications. The deployment of company troops within princely territories allowed for rapid mobilization in response to internal or external threats. These forces served both as a deterrent to local rebellion and as an instrument for projecting British influence beyond directly controlled regions. By controlling the composition, training, and deployment of these contingents, the company ensured that Allied states could not mount independent military initiatives that would threaten company interests. Over time, the presence of British troops reinforced the perception of company supremacy and shaped the strategic environment of the subcontinent. Diplomatic relations with princely states were supplemented by political agents and residents stationed at the courts of Allied rulers. These officials observed internal governance, reported on political developments, and advised rulers on matters of policy, succession, and administration. While their role was ostensibly advisory, The influence of company representatives often extended to decision-making in key areas of governance. Through this network, the company maintained continuous surveillance and exerted influence without the costs associated with direct administration. The integration of political agents with the subsidiary alliance framework exemplified the company's method of indirect rule, combining observation, counsel, and coercion to achieve compliance. The effectiveness of this approach was evident in the stabilization of regions that might otherwise have resisted British expansion. In northern India, states such as Awadh, after the Treaty of Benares in 1773, accepted British oversight in military and fiscal matters while retaining nominal sovereignty. The arrangement allowed the company to secure strategic lines of communication, maintain access to revenue streams, and ensure political loyalty. Similar patterns were observed in Rajasthan, Bundelkhand, and other regions, where princely states negotiated terms that preserved their internal autonomy in exchange for recognition of British supremacy and compliance with subsidiary obligations. Economic dimensions of relations with princely states were also significant. The imposition of subsidies, control over external trade, and integration into the company's economic networks ensured that local economies contributed to British fiscal stability. States were often required to allow the company preferential trading rights, facilitating access to commodities such as textiles, spices, and agricultural produce. The alignment of economic and political objectives reinforced company authority, creating interdependence that extended beyond military and diplomatic arrangements. Princely states became both clients and partners in the broader commercial and political system established by the company. Legal and administrative influence complemented military and economic control. Through treaties, the company was able to regulate succession, adjudicate disputes, and influence the appointment of key officials within allied states. These interventions were designed to prevent instability that might challenge the company's authority and to ensure continuity of compliance. The combination of legal oversight, economic dependency, and military protection constituted a coherent system of indirect control, reducing the likelihood of coordinated resistance while preserving the outward appearance of native rule. Relations with princely states were not static, and the company's policies evolved in response to shifting political circumstances. Diplomatic maneuvering, military campaigns, and strategic marriages or alliances were employed to manage emerging threats or consolidate influence. Conflicts occasionally arose when rulers sought to assert greater autonomy or resist subsidiary obligations, necessitating military intervention or renegotiation of treaties. The flexibility of the subsidiary alliance system allowed the company to adapt, either reinforcing control through coercion or accommodating local authority to maintain stability and loyalty. By the early 19th century, the framework established through relations with princely states facilitated the East India Company's expansion across large portions of the subcontinent without requiring continuous direct administration. The integration of military, economic, legal, and diplomatic tools created a network of subordinate yet semi-autonomous states, effectively extending British influence over regions including the Deccan, northern India, and parts of central India. This system minimized administrative costs, leveraged existing local structures, and provided strategic depth for further territorial acquisitions. The experience of managing princely states during this period also prepared the company for subsequent encounters with the Maratha Confederacy and other major powers. Lessons learned regarding loyalty, coercion, fiscal management, and the deployment of troops informed the strategy for confronting large, complex regional coalitions. By establishing predictable patterns of control, the company reduced uncertainty, maintained access to revenue and resources, and created conditions for long-term stability that would endure until the formal establishment of the British Raj. By the late 18th century, the Maratha Confederacy emerged as the most powerful indigenous polity in western and central India, exercising influence over extensive territories including present-day Maharashtra, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and parts of northern India. The Confederacy was a coalition of semi-autonomous chiefs, including the Peshwa in Pune, the Scindias of Gwalior, the Holkars of Indore, the Bhosles of Nagpur, and the Gaikwads of Baroda. While nominally united under the Peshwa, the Confederacy's political structure relied on a delicate balance of authority among these regional powers, each maintaining its own military and fiscal administration. The fragmentation and competitive dynamics among Maratha chiefs provided the East India Company with opportunities to intervene, negotiate, and, ultimately, assert military dominance over Western India. The strategic and economic significance of the Maratha Confederacy made it a focal point for company expansion. The region's fertile agricultural lands, trade routes connecting northern and southern India, and access to ports along the western coast facilitated both the extraction of revenue and the integration of the subcontinent into wider commercial networks. Additionally, the Marathas' military capacity, including cavalry, infantry, and artillery, represented both a threat to company interests and a potential obstacle to expansion into northern and central India. The company, having secured Bengal, southern India, and northern territories through previous campaigns and subsidiary alliances, recognized that the control of Western India was essential to achieving contiguous territorial authority and consolidating influence across the subcontinent. Tensions between the company and the Marathas escalated in the context of the Second Anglo-Maratha War, 1803 to 1805. The immediate causes included disputes over territorial boundaries, interference in succession disputes, and the company's strategic objective of controlling key regions in present-day Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, and Maharashtra. The Peshwa Baji Rao II's inability to maintain cohesion among Maratha chiefs, coupled with internal rivalries, weakened the Confederacy's capacity to resist coordinated company campaigns. The company leveraged these divisions, forming alliances with some Maratha chiefs while isolating others, thereby exploiting the decentralized structure of the Confederacy to its advantage. Military operations during the Second Anglo-Maratha War were characterized by coordinated campaigns targeting principal Maratha strongholds. British forces, organized under European-trained regiments and supplemented by sepoy contingents, employed disciplined infantry and artillery formations to seize key forts and towns. The company's strategy emphasized the disruption of Maratha supply lines, sieges of fortified positions, and selective engagements designed to exploit disparities in discipline and organization. Allied contingents from rival Maratha factions and regional powers, including the Scindias and Gaikwads, who aligned with company objectives, provided additional manpower and intelligence, further weakening the cohesion of opposing forces. Significant battles, such as the engagements at Asai and Laswari, demonstrated the company's operational effectiveness. At Asai, Major General Arthur Wellesley, later Duke of Wellington, commanded a force of approximately 5,000 troops against a Maratha army exceeding 50,000, employing disciplined infantry squares, coordinated artillery barges, and cavalry maneuvers to achieve a decisive victory. The success at Assaye underscored the tactical advantages conferred by European military discipline, organization, and training, enabling the company to overcome numerical inferiority and assert control over strategically critical regions. Subsequent engagements consolidated British authority, culminating in the occupation of key territories in western and central India. The outcome of the Second Anglo-Maratha War resulted in the Treaty of Bassein, 1802, and subsequent agreements, which formalized company influence over the Peshwa and other Maratha chiefs. These treaties imposed conditions including territorial cessions, recognition of British authority in external relations, and the placement of company troops within Maratha territories. The agreements also required the payment of subsidies and indemnities, ensuring both fiscal advantage and strategic leverage. While the Confederacy retained nominal autonomy and internal governance, the company effectively controlled its foreign policy, military movements, and territorial disposition, establishing a precedent for indirect rule coupled with military oversight. Despite these concessions, residual Maratha power persisted, particularly in the holdings of the Scindias and Holkars, who retained considerable autonomy and military capacity. Continued friction and disputes over territorial claims led to the Third Anglo-Maratha War, 1817 to 1818, the final phase in the company's subjugation of Western India. The war was prompted by resistance to company authority, efforts to consolidate Maratha influence independently, and the strategic necessity of eliminating rival powers to secure unchallenged dominance over the subcontinent. The conflict involved coordinated operations across multiple regions, including present-day Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, and northern India, employing both conventional battlefield engagements and sieges of fortified positions. Key campaigns during the Third Anglo-Maratha War demonstrated the systematic dismantling of Maratha military infrastructure. The company deployed European and sepoy forces in coordinated offensives against major Maratha forts, including those at Gwalior and Nagpur. Cavalry and infantry units executed strategic maneuvers to isolate Maratha contingents, while artillery barges weakened fortifications and defensive positions. The deployment of intelligence networks, logistical support, and local alliances further enhanced operational effectiveness. Company forces were able to capture key leaders, negotiate surrenders, and enforce territorial annexations, systematically undermining the Confederacy's capacity to resist. The surrender of the Peshwa Baji Rao II in 1818 marked the formal end of the Maratha Confederacy as an independent political entity. Territories formerly under the Peshwa's control were annexed or placed under company influence, while subordinate Maratha chiefs were incorporated into subsidiary alliances or ceded authority to company administration. The military defeat, combined with the strategic absorption of territory and fiscal resources, completed the company's consolidation of Western India. The destruction of the Confederacy's centralized military and political structures eliminated the principal indigenous barrier to British expansion across the subcontinent, enabling unimpeded territorial integration. The annexation of Maratha territories had significant economic and administrative consequences. Fertile agricultural lands, trade centers, and access to strategic passes were integrated into company revenue systems, providing financial resources to support both administration and military operations. Local intermediaries were co-opted to facilitate revenue collection, implement judicial oversight, and maintain law and order, reflecting the administrative model refined in Bengal and other territories. The integration of these regions expanded the company's fiscal base and strategic depth, facilitating subsequent operations in northern India and along key trade corridors. The company's approach to the Marathas illustrates the combination of military, diplomatic, and administrative instruments in achieving territorial dominance. The systematic application of force, supplemented by alliances with rival factions and fiscal inducements, allowed the company to exploit internal divisions and extend control without provoking protracted insurgencies. Administrative mechanisms, including revenue collection, judicial oversight, and incorporation of local intermediaries, ensured sustainable governance over newly acquired territories. This integration exemplified the evolution of company governance, moving from localized control in Bengal and southern India to expansive authority across multiple regions. The Treaty of Pune, concluded in June 1818, marked the formal conclusion of hostilities between the East India Company and the remnants of the Maratha Confederacy and represented a pivotal point in the consolidation of British authority across the Indian subcontinent. By this time, the company had systematically engaged and subdued the major factions within the Maratha Confederacy through military campaigns, diplomatic negotiation, and strategic alliances, culminating in the absorption of significant territories and the neutralization of indigenous political opposition. The treaty formalized the results of the Third Anglo-Maratha War, 1817 to 1818, and codified the terms under which the company would exercise both direct and indirect control over the previously autonomous Maratha states. The background to the treaty lies in the prolonged military campaigns waged against the Marathas. The company, under the command of experienced European officers and reinforced by disciplined sepoy contingents, had engaged the combined forces of the Peshwa, the Scindias, the Holkars, and the Bhosles in a series of operations designed to dismantle their capacity for coordinated resistance. Operations involved sieges of major fortifications, interception of supply lines, and the systematic subjugation of territories that had served as the operational and economic bases of Maratha power. These campaigns demonstrated the company's ability to integrate tactical military action with strategic political objectives, including the capture of key leaders and the disruption of centralized Maratha administration. The Treaty of Pune itself codified several critical outcomes. First, it confirmed the annexation of territories formerly under the control of the Peshwa, including strategic regions in western and central India. Second, it imposed restrictions on the military capabilities of surviving Maratha chiefs, preventing the maintenance of independent armed forces without company supervision. Third, it required the payment of indemnities and the cession of specific territories to the company, ensuring both immediate fiscal benefit and long-term strategic advantage. These terms effectively eliminated the Marathas as an autonomous political force while allowing residual influence for local leaders under strict subsidiary arrangements. The annexation and redistribution of Maratha territories had significant administrative and economic implications. Land revenue systems previously organized under Maratha authorities were integrated into the East India Company's existing bureaucratic structures, modeled on the frameworks developed in Bengal and southern India. Company officials undertook comprehensive surveys of agricultural production, landholdings, and population distribution, standardizing assessment and collection procedures to ensure predictability and fiscal stability. Local intermediaries, including former Maratha officials and village elites, were retained in administrative roles where practical, facilitating the transition of authority and preserving continuity in governance. These measures minimize disruption while maximizing the efficiency of revenue extraction. Military consolidation accompanied administrative integration. Key fortifications previously controlled by the Marathas were occupied by company garrisons, strategically positioned to secure major trade routes, river crossings, and access points to surrounding territories. European-trained officers supervised sepoy units tasked with both defensive operations and the enforcement of law and order. The permanent presence of these forces ensured that residual resistance could be suppressed and that company authority would be reinforced across the newly acquired regions. Coordination between military command and administrative officials became a defining feature of governance, allowing the company to project power efficiently and maintain control over expansive territories. The treaty also addressed the diplomatic position of surviving Maratha chiefs. While direct military power was curtailed, these leaders were incorporated into a framework of subsidiary alliances and dependent arrangements, allowing them to retain limited internal autonomy under company supervision. These arrangements included obligations to accept company oversight in external affairs, contribute to military contingents maintained by the company, and implement fiscal measures consistent with British policy. This system of indirect control allowed the company to minimize administrative expenditure while ensuring that these territories remained loyal and compliant. Over time, these mechanisms became a standard model for governance across other regions with residual indigenous authority. Strategically, the Treaty of Poona consolidated company control over the western and central Indian Plateau, establishing contiguous territories linking previously acquired regions in the south, east, and north. Control over critical trade routes, river systems, and agricultural zones provided both economic stability and military advantage, facilitating further integration of the subcontinent into the company's administrative and commercial network. The consolidation achieved under the treaty laid the groundwork for the long-term projection of British authority, enabling the company to operate across India without significant resistance from major indigenous powers. Economic integration extended beyond revenue collection. The company regulated trade within former Maratha territories, ensuring that local production contributed to broader commercial objectives, particularly the export of agricultural commodities, textiles, and raw materials. Markets were reorganized to favor company-monitored exchanges, and port access was controlled to prevent diversion of trade profits. The alignment of fiscal, military, and commercial policies allowed the company to extract maximum benefit from the newly incorporated regions while simultaneously reinforcing political dependence and stability. Administrative reforms under the Treaty of Poona included the codification of legal and judicial practices. Company officials supervised the continuation of existing courts while establishing mechanisms to enforce laws and adjudicate disputes according to both customary norms and emerging colonial regulations. Revenue officials, political agents, and judicial officers coordinated their activities to maintain order, enforce treaty obligations, and ensure that residual Maratha leaders complied with subsidiary alliance conditions. The integration of these administrative layers provided coherence, reduced ambiguity in governance, and allowed the company to implement uniform standards across a diverse and previously fragmented territory. The suppression of Maratha military structures was reinforced by a systematic reorganization of local militias and the prevention of independent fortification construction. Former Maratha leaders were permitted to maintain limited forces for internal policing under company oversight, but were prohibited from developing capabilities that could challenge British supremacy. This approach ensured that the strategic advantage of the company's European-trained regiments remained unchallenged while simultaneously delegating minor security responsibilities to local authorities. The balance of direct and indirect control optimized military efficiency and reinforced long-term political stability. The Treaty of Poona also had implications for succession and governance within the Maratha territories. Company officials assumed a supervisory role in determining the legitimacy of heirs, succession disputes, and administrative appointments, ensuring that local governance structures would remain aligned with British objectives. These interventions minimized the potential for internal conflict to destabilize regions critical for economic and strategic purposes. In effect, the treaty created a model in which residual local rulers retained nominal authority, while substantive control over political, military, and economic matters resided with the East India Company. By 1818, the Treaty of Poona represented the culmination of decades of systematic engagement with Western India, integrating military conquest, fiscal administration, legal oversight, and diplomatic negotiation into a coherent framework of governance. The absorption of Maratha territories completed the company's territorial expansion across the subcontinent, linking previously acquired regions from Bengal, southern India, and northern territories into a contiguous political and administrative structure. The experience of negotiation, warfare, and administrative integration during this period established practices that would inform governance across the remaining princely states and set the stage for long-term British dominance in India. The outcomes of the Treaty of Poona exemplify the company's capacity to translate military victories into sustainable political and administrative control. And oversight of internal administration allowed the company to neutralize a major indigenous power without excessive expenditure of resources or prolonged insurgency. This approach provided a replicable model for subsequent interactions with other Indian states, demonstrating the integration of military, economic, and administrative instruments into a cohesive strategy of colonial governance. The consolidation of the East India Company's authority in India by 1818 initiated profound transformations in the economic and social structures of the subcontinent. The company, having evolved from a commercial enterprise to a territorial power, integrated a vast expanse of previously semi-autonomous regions into a unified administrative and fiscal framework. These changes affected agriculture, trade, taxation, labor organization, and societal hierarchies, creating a new system in which political authority, economic extraction, and social organization were interdependent and increasingly oriented towards sustaining British interests. The economic policies pursued by the company, although framed in terms of revenue maximization and administrative efficiency, had significant consequences for local production, commerce, and the distribution of resources. Agricultural systems across newly acquired territories were reoriented to optimize revenue collection. Land assessment practices, building upon earlier experiments in Bengal and southern India, were standardized and expanded to western and central regions. Surveyors and revenue officials measured land holdings, recorded cultivation patterns, and calculated taxation rates based on output and productivity. The resulting system, often enforced through intermediaries including local elites and zamindars, ensured a predictable flow of revenue to the company treasury. While these arrangements provided administrative stability and financial resources for the company's operations, they altered traditional relationships between cultivators, landlords, and the state, introducing a fiscal logic that prioritized monetary extraction over subsistence or communal obligations. Land tenure and property arrangements were affected by these revenue systems. Traditional rights of peasants, often embedded in local customary law, were subordinated to the company's tax demands. Proprietorship concepts were formalized, and fixed assessments were imposed, sometimes resulting in increased pressure on cultivators during periods of poor harvest or economic fluctuation. The requirement for cash payments, as opposed to in-kind contributions, incentivized the expansion of commercial agriculture, particularly in regions suitable for cash crops such as indigo, cotton, and opium. These crops, integrated into British and global markets, provided both fiscal income for the company and commodities for export, linking Indian production to international trade networks and transforming agrarian economies into instruments of commercial extraction. Trade policies further reinforced the company's economic objectives. Local commerce was subordinated to British priorities through preferential tariffs, monopolistic arrangements, and control over key ports and trade routes. Commodities produced in India, including textiles, spices, and raw materials, were directed into company-managed channels for export to Europe and other colonial markets. Simultaneously, the importation of British goods, particularly manufactured textiles and industrial products, reshaped local markets, creating dependencies and stimulating shifts in production patterns. These trade policies integrated Indian regions into a broader commercial network oriented toward British economic advantage, while constraining indigenous entrepreneurial activity and limiting competitive market practices. The militarization and administrative expansion required to secure these economic systems also had social consequences. The presence of company garrisons, political agents, and revenue officials altered local power dynamics, often reinforcing the authority of compliant elites while marginalizing or displacing independent actors. Former military structures, such as the armies of Mysore or Maratha contingents, were disbanded or subordinated, reducing the capacity of local rulers to resist company directives. In territories administered indirectly through princely alliances, the integration of military oversight and fiscal obligations created dependencies that reshaped the relationships between rulers, subjects, and colonial authority. Local populations encountered new hierarchies in which company officials, supported by disciplined sepoy regiments, represented the apex of political and coercive power. Societal hierarchies and the role of elites evolved under these conditions. Traditional aristocracies and warrior classes, including Maratha chiefs, Vodayar rulers, and other local elites, were either incorporated into subsidiary arrangements or subordinated to company authority. Some elites retained nominal power and social status, serving as intermediaries in administration and revenue collection. Others lost authority entirely, resulting in shifts in local governance and social influence. The company's intervention in succession disputes, appointment of officials, and oversight of judicial functions altered customary norms, centralizing decision-making in the hands of administrators accountable to British authority rather than local constituencies. Urban centers and commercial hubs were transformed by the company's economic policies. Cities such as Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras became focal points for trade, administration, and political control, linking hinterland production with maritime export networks. Infrastructure development, including roads, river navigation improvements, and port facilities, facilitated the movement of goods and military forces, further integrating regions into company-dominated economic circuits. These developments created new opportunities for commerce and labor, while simultaneously concentrating wealth and political influence in urban centers under British supervision. Education and cultural influence were also shaped by the emerging colonial framework. Exposure to European administrative practices, legal codes, and fiscal methods fostered the emergence of a Western-educated elite, often trained to serve in company administration or allied princely states. These individuals acquired knowledge of English, European law, and modern bureaucratic techniques, enabling participation in the governance of newly acquired territories. The dissemination of Western education, while limited in scope initially, laid the foundation for subsequent intellectual, professional, and political engagement, creating a class that would later become central to discourse on governance, reform, and nationalist aspirations. The company's fiscal and administrative orientation influenced the labor organization. Military conscription, both voluntary and coerced, incorporated local populations into company-controlled forces, creating employment opportunities while reinforcing dependence on colonial structures. Peasants, artisans, and merchants were increasingly drawn into economic networks defined by tax obligations, market demands, and resource allocation dictated by company priorities. Traditional craft production, such as textiles and metalwork, was disrupted in some regions by competition from imported British goods, leading to shifts in occupational patterns and the reorganization of labor around market-oriented production. Military campaigns undertaken to secure territorial control, including operations against Mysore, the Marathas, and other regional powers, produced both immediate and longer-term social effects. Populations in contested regions experienced displacement, property loss, and disruptions to agricultural and commercial activity. The integration of these territories into company administration required reconstruction of administrative mechanisms, resettlement of populations, and adaptation to fiscal and legal systems imposed from the center. While these interventions facilitated stability and revenue generation, they also altered established social relationships and introduced new hierarchies based on loyalty, compliance, and service to company authorities. The consolidation of British authority, economic extraction, and administrative oversight created structural interdependencies between governance, revenue, and social organization. Company policies prioritized revenue security, military readiness, and commercial advantage, shaping local economies and societal hierarchies accordingly. Local elites, military actors, and commercial intermediaries were integrated into the colonial system, their authority and activity contingent on compliance with company objectives. Peasants, artisans, and laborers were positioned within a framework oriented toward production for revenue and trade, linking regional economies to both company governance and global markets. Cultural and social continuity persisted, however, through local institutions, religious practices, and community structures. While the company imposed administrative and fiscal controls, it generally refrained from direct interference in religious life, customary law, or internal community organization, except when deemed necessary for governance or strategic purposes. This selective intervention facilitated compliance while minimizing resistance, allowing the company to consolidate authority without provoking widespread social upheaval. Nonetheless, the long-term integration of territories into the company's economic and administrative network gradually reshaped social expectations, obligations, and hierarchies, producing enduring effects on Indian society. The period following 1818 exemplifies the interaction of military conquest, fiscal policy, trade regulation, and administrative consolidation in shaping economic and social structures under the East India Company. Revenue systems, trade networks, urban development, and education policies operated in concert to integrate the subcontinent into a framework of political, economic, and social control designed to sustain colonial authority. These measures reinforced the company's capacity to govern extensive territories, stabilize regions formerly dominated by independent rulers, and extract resources efficiently. The structural transformations enacted during this period created conditions for subsequent political, economic, and social developments, including the emergence of Western-educated elites, the reorganization of agricultural and commercial production, and the alignment of local governance with British strategic objectives. By 1818, following the conclusion of the Third Anglo-Maratha War and the Treaty of Poona, the East India Company had established near-complete political and military authority over the Indian subcontinent. Administrative reforms and diplomatic strategies that neutralized major indigenous powers and incorporated princely states under British influence. The period between 1757 and 1818 represents the decisive phase in which the company transitioned from a commercial enterprise with trading privileges into a governing authority capable of exercising sustained territorial control, setting the structural foundations that would later underpin the formal British Raj. The administrative framework established by the company during this period reflected a combination of direct governance in strategically important territories and indirect oversight through subsidiary alliances. Direct administration was implemented in regions such as Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa, where revenue collection, judicial oversight, and law enforcement were centralized under company officials. The system relied on both British personnel and locally recruited intermediaries to implement policy, enforce fiscal obligations, and maintain civil order. Indirect administration, practiced in princely states across northern, western, and southern India, relied on treaties, subsidiary alliances, and the placement of political agents at native courts. This dual model allowed the company to extend influence efficiently, minimizing administrative costs while securing compliance from local rulers. Revenue systems developed in Bengal and expanded to other territories formed the financial backbone of the company's authority. The land revenue, particularly in regions under direct administration, became the primary source of income, funding both military and civil expenditures. Detailed surveys, record-keeping, and assessment of agricultural output provided predictability and stability in fiscal collection. The emphasis on cash-based taxation incentivized the growth of commercial agriculture, linking local production to company-controlled markets and broader international trade networks. Revenue policies were enforced through intermediaries, often local elites or zamindars, whose participation ensured continuity in governance while reinforcing hierarchical dependencies on the company. Military consolidation was equally central to the foundations of British authority. The company maintained a professional army, composed of European officers and trained sepoy units, capable of projecting force across diverse terrains and suppressing resistance. Key fortifications captured during campaigns against Bengal, Mysore, the Marathas, and other regional powers were garrisoned strategically, providing defensive depth and controlling trade routes, river passages, and critical communications. The integration of former indigenous forces, either through disbandment, subordination, or incorporation into subsidiary alliances, allowed the company to neutralize potential threats while retaining local expertise and manpower. The military structure supported both administrative control and political authority, ensuring that policies could be enforced consistently across the subcontinent. Diplomacy and political strategy complemented military and administrative efforts. Subsidiary alliances, treaties, and agreements with princely states formalized company supremacy while preserving nominal local authority. These arrangements permitted the East India Company to influence succession disputes, administrative appointments, and foreign relations without the costs associated with direct annexation. Political agents stationed at courts monitored governance, advised rulers, and intervened in decision-making when necessary, creating a pervasive network of surveillance and influence. The combination of indirect control, fiscal obligation, and military oversight produced a coherent system of governance that integrated formerly independent territories into a centralized framework of authority. The company's consolidation extended into economic and social structures. Trade networks were reorganized to prioritize British commercial interests, directing production, export, and market activity toward company-monitored channels. Urban centers became administrative and economic hubs, linking rural production with regional and international markets. Local elites, artisans, and intermediaries were incorporated into these networks, often subordinated to the priorities of the company. Simultaneously, Western-style education, administrative training, and exposure to British legal codes began to create a class of Indian administrators and professionals capable of operating within the colonial system. This emergent class would later play a central role in governance, social reform, and, eventually, nationalist discourse. Legal and judicial reforms were implemented to support administrative control and integrate territories into the company's framework. Courts, codes, and procedural systems were established or adapted from existing indigenous practices, providing mechanisms for dispute resolution, law enforcement, and regulation of fiscal and commercial activity. British oversight ensured that local laws were applied in ways consistent with the objectives of governance and revenue extraction. The standardization of legal structures across diverse regions facilitated predictability and coherence, reinforcing the company's authority while minimizing resistance to policy implementation. The integration of formerly autonomous territories required attention to succession, governance, and internal stability. In regions previously dominated by the Marathas, Mysore rulers, or Nawabs of Bengal, the company intervened to ensure orderly transitions of power, the alignment of administrative appointments with colonial objectives, and the implementation of revenue and legal systems. Political oversight and, when necessary, military intervention guaranteed that local authorities remained compliant, reinforcing the hierarchical structure of colonial governance and mitigating potential instability arising from competing indigenous claims. The company's expansion and consolidation also involved the transformation of social hierarchies and power dynamics. Indigenous elites, including former rulers, military leaders, and local officials, were either incorporated into subsidiary structures or marginalized according to their compliance with company objectives. The creation of interdependencies between the company and local power holders fostered loyalty, while simultaneously diminishing the capacity for coordinated opposition. Traditional structures persisted in cultural, religious, and local administrative contexts, but these were increasingly subordinated to fiscal, military, and legal oversight dictated by the colonial framework. By 1818, the foundations for the British Raj were firmly established in both structural and operational terms. The company possessed a contiguous network of territories spanning Bengal, Bihar, Orissa, southern India, and western and central regions formerly controlled by the Marathas. Military, fiscal, administrative, and diplomatic mechanisms ensured the efficient exercise of authority, while the integration of trade and economic policies aligned local production with company priorities. Subsidiary alliances provided a model for indirect control of princely states, extending influence without necessitating continuous direct administration. Together, these elements created a durable framework capable of sustaining long-term political dominance and facilitating the further expansion of colonial influence. The period from 1757 to 1818 thus represents the transformation of the East India Company from a trading enterprise into a de facto sovereign power. Military victories, diplomatic negotiation, administrative reform, and economic integration combined to neutralize major indigenous powers and incorporate semi-autonomous states into a coherent system of governance. These decades established the institutional, fiscal, and military structures that would enable the subsequent formalization of British rule under the Crown in 1858. The consolidation achieved by 1818 created both the territorial basis and the administrative capacity necessary for a centralized colonial regime capable of managing the diverse and expansive population of India. The processes of integration, control, and reform that defined this period were methodical and systematic. They relied on the careful calibration of force, diplomacy, and administrative oversight, utilizing subsidiary alliances, fiscal extraction, military deployment, and legal standardization to achieve objectives without provoking widespread disruption. Local intermediaries and Western-educated elites were incorporated into the governance apparatus, facilitating compliance while ensuring continuity of administration. These practices created a stable foundation that enabled the company to manage complex political, social, and economic dynamics across an extensive and diverse subcontinent. The consolidation of British authority in India between 1757 and 1818 represents a decisive transformation of the subcontinent's political, economic, and social structures. The period began with India in a state of fragmentation, as the Mughal Empire's power had waned and regional powers such as the Nawabs of Bengal, the Marathas, and the rulers of Mysore exercised autonomous control. European trading companies, particularly the East India Company, initially engaged in commerce but increasingly involved themselves in the political and administrative affairs of these territories. The company's engagement in Bengal marked the first significant step toward territorial dominance. By forming strategic alliances with local elites and influencing succession disputes, the company positioned itself to intervene in governance while expanding its commercial interests. The Battle of Plassey in 1757, led by Robert Clive, decisively shifted authority in Bengal by leveraging defections among local allies and coordinating military and diplomatic resources. Following this, the consolidation of Bengal involved the establishment of administrative and revenue systems that transformed the company into a de facto political authority, integrating local elites into its framework while extending military and bureaucratic oversight. The subsequent Battle of Buxar in 1764 further reinforced the company's supremacy by defeating a coalition of the Nawab of Bengal, the Nawab of Awadh, and the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II. This victory secured formal recognition of company authority over Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa, solidifying both fiscal and political control. Administrative structures, revenue collection systems, and judicial oversight established during this period laid the foundation for direct governance, demonstrating the company's capacity to transform military victories into sustainable territorial control. Expansion into southern India involved a series of conflicts with Mysore under Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan. Through successive Mysore Wars, culminating in the capture of Srirangapatna in 1799, the company eliminated a major indigenous power in the south, integrating its territories into the colonial framework. These campaigns illustrated the strategic combination of military discipline, logistical planning, and alliances with regional actors to secure territory without prolonged insurgency. The company's influence over princely states was consolidated through subsidiary alliances, which permitted local rulers to retain internal autonomy while ceding external relations and military authority to the British. This model of indirect rule enabled the company to expand influence efficiently across diverse regions, minimizing administrative costs and maintaining strategic control. By the early 19th century, the Maratha Confederacy represented the last significant indigenous political challenge to company authority. The Second Anglo-Maratha War, 1803 to 1805, and the Third Anglo-Maratha War, 1817 to 1818, systematically dismantled Maratha military and political structures. Through decisive battles, sieges, and strategic alliances, the company captured key territories and neutralized indigenous resistance, culminating in the Treaty of Poona in 1818. This treaty formalized British supremacy, annexed critical regions, imposed military restrictions on former Maratha rulers, and integrated remaining Maratha chiefs into subsidiary arrangements. The economic and social impacts of this consolidation were substantial. Revenue systems prioritized company income and enforced cash-based taxation, reorienting agricultural production toward commercial markets and facilitating integration into international trade networks. Trade policies favored British interests, controlling commodity flows, regulating ports, and shaping urban and regional economies. Social hierarchies were reorganized, with local elites either subordinated to company authority or incorporated into administrative roles, while Western-educated intermediaries emerged to participate in governance. Military campaigns, administrative reforms, and the establishment of legal structures reinforced the company's authority, creating systemic control over populations, labor, and production. By 1818, the East India Company had transitioned from a commercial entity into a territorial power capable of exercising sustained authority across the Indian subcontinent. Administrative, military, and fiscal structures provided the foundation for long-term governance, while subsidiary alliances ensured the compliance of remaining princely states. Trade, revenue, and military networks were integrated to support both economic extraction and political dominance. The period established the institutional, operational, and territorial basis upon which the formal British Raj would later be built after 1858. In essence, the years from 1757 to 1818 constitute the critical phase in which Britain secured political, military, and economic control over India. Military victories at Plassey, Buxar, Mysore, and against the Marathas, combined with administrative innovations, subsidiary treaties, and financial integration, enabled the company to neutralize major indigenous powers and establish enduring authority. The consolidation of territories, integration of revenue and trade systems, reorganization of social hierarchies, and establishment of professional administration collectively created the framework of colonial governance that would dominate India for the following century. This period thus represents the decisive transformation of India from a collection of semi-autonomous regional powers into a territory under effective British control, laying the enduring foundations of the British Raj.